when Andy's good, like with the video and everything. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is In-Game Live Game Day here on SportsGrid with Brady, Kannon, and Adam Kaufman. We have got you for the next couple of hours, continuing our tour of the AFC East. Of course, yesterday it was all about the Bills, the Patriots. No question, those are the perceived top two teams in the division. Really, it's Buffalo and everybody else, but the Patriots, there's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of excitement around the Pats, justifiably or not. I mean, depends who you talk to, I guess, going into this new season. The Dolphins, a team that a lot of people fear are heading in the wrong direction. Then, of course, there is the Jets, which are they to be taken seriously, or are they fighting for the number one overall pick in the draft come April? We are going to explore right out of the chute here with the Jets for the next little bit. And before we bring in our guests, let's tell you just some of what you need to know as far as the odds go on New York right now. Over-under of just 5.5 wins entering the new season. Minus 135 to the over, plus money to the under, plus 115 over on FanDuel. 19-1 to win the division, 120-1 to win the conference, 240-1 to win the Super Bowl. If you really want to be bold, you got a bonus bet you want to burn, right? Plus 520 to make the playoffs, minus 800 to miss. Tells you everything you need to know about what Vegas thinks of the Jets this upcoming season. Let's get into it. Andy Vasquez joins us, covers the Jets for NJ Advanced Media, is on Twitter at Andy_Vasquez. Andy, and Brady for that matter, welcome to the program. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Great to have you here with us. Now, look, training camp is a little underway, but we're not at the preseason games yet. And so a lot can happen, obviously, between now and early September when the season gets going. But there was a lot of doom and gloom right out of the chute because you had Justin Fields go down with what at the time we didn't know turned out to be a dislocated toe, and he's right back at practice the next day, but he's carted off the field, and it's, oh my God, is this, now going to be Tyrod Taylor's team, and what's this going to look like, and how bad to be? Jets fans believing they're cursed after what happened with Aaron Rodgers and so many quarterbacks even before then. But Fields is back, looks great, getting rave reviews in camp. What are the expectations specifically around the quarterback and as it ties into the new head coach, Aaron Glenn?
Yeah, I think it's a weird spot the Jets are in because they are definitely less talented than last year. I mean, there's no doubt about that. They lost, obviously, at quarterback. You're going from a guy who couldn't win the job over Russell Wilson, who has not been very good, and was 4-2, and they still gave the job to Russell Wilson. You're going with, at wide receiver, losing Devontae Adams. In the secondary, losing DJ Reed and replacing him with Brandon Stevens, a guy who struggled last year in Baltimore. So, at key positions, they've lost a lot of talent, but on defense, they've still got an all-pro at all three levels, and Quincy Williams, and Sauce Gardner. I think the defense is probably going to be pretty good and keep them competitive, and I just think they're going to be better disciplined. They're going to have, be pulling more commonly in the right direction. I think there was a lot of confusion about what the expectations were last year, and how they were being held accountable, and I think, everything that was going on with Rodgers and his influence, that was, massive, but also he was trying to downplay it, and the coach was trying to make it look like it wasn't as big as it was. It was a weird situation. So Aaron Glenn is firmly in control. It's pretty clear that Darren Muji, the new GM, is kind of following his marching orders. And I think that's a good thing for the Jets. I mean, but they are the Jets, and they've looked pretty good these first 8 days of camp, and then they come out yesterday and they had 12 penalties and team drills, and everything they've been working on in training camp didn't look very good in the scrimmage practice that all the fans were looking forward to. So you never know, but I think with the expectations so low, it's like the Jets are going to be better than people think. That's just what I think. This is how they always do it, and I think they've got the talent to be pretty good, but there are question marks.
Andy, I want to ask you about the coaching dynamic. Obviously, Aaron Glenn comes in, a former defensive coordinator, former defensive player for the Jets, and you pair him with a new defensive coordinator in Steve Wilks, the much-traveled Steve Wilks from Carolina to San Francisco. How's the chemistry between those two guys been? And it seems like the focal point for the Jets for a few years now has been the defense. Does this look like a good fit for you?
Yeah, Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think it's going to be helpful to them for, especially early in the season. Teams aren't going to know what to expect on offense because which scheme are they going to use more? I think there's going to be a lot of Glenn in there. There's going to be a lot of Wilkes. The one big difference that we've seen over recent years is that they're going to blitz. I mean, they never blitz, basically. It was maybe once or twice a game under Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich. They prided themselves on getting pushed with the front four and then playing, a pretty standard coverage and doing it well. And it worked really well in terms of limiting yards. And they were top 5 in yards the last 3 years. But especially this last year, they weren't a top 5 defense. When it mattered, they were terrible. They gave up big plays. They had, really poorly timed penalties, discipline issues, and making the kind of mistakes you just can't make when it was on the line. And that's how you get to where they were last year, where they were way more talented than, having 5 wins. So I think that's going to be interesting. And, the players have raved about it. I think I don't think they're meaning to throw the previous staff under the bus, but like Sauce Gardner said, like, I know this coach is going to put me in a position to succeed. Michael Carter talked about how they've been cross-training all of the secondary players. Michael Carter at the slot corner, he's been talking about how all the secondary players have cross-trained at every position and how that helps, in terms of when there's an injury and just knowing the defense better. And then Jamie Sherwood, I think, is kind of going to be the key to this defense. CJ Mosley retires. Sherwood was kind of, brought along by him. He started in the league as a safety, tore his Achilles his first year, transitioned to linebacker, and stepped in last year and played at a really high level, got a new contract. He's really good in coverage. There was a play in practice the other day where Garrett Wilson was coming through the middle at top speed. Sherwood recognized it, backpedaled, and ran stride for stride with him and forced an overthrow from Fields. So I think they're going to be pretty solid, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of, honestly, just if we're looking at this from a Vegas perspective versus what you're talking about, I think there's a lot that honestly just it doesn't mesh, right? It doesn't mix well, because on the one hand, like, I agree with you. I think the Jets, I don't think they're going to be a good team, but I think they should be better than where the market is on them at 5.5 wins. Like 6 wins, 7 wins is still not a particularly good season, but it's considerably better than just, we sleeping on this team. Like, let's not forget, and I don't believe this was solely Aaron Rodgers as much as the hype and pedigree and everything when he was coming in there before the injury, of course. I mean, he signs on and we've got all this talent on defense. We've got all this talent on the offensive line. We've got all this talent in between Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson and so on. Super Bowl contenders, and people are betting left and right on this team to win a championship. And then, even last year, him coming off the injury, it was still a lot of, well, Rodgers, he'll be fine. He'll get him. But look at all the talent. Well, the talent's still there, except now it's Fields. So the question really is it that big a drop-off between Aaron Rodgers to Justin Fields at, again, Rodgers at this stage of his career, or are there just a ton of unknowns with a first-year coaching staff?
I mean, I think there is a drop-off that's bigger than people want to realize. I mean, when you look at what Fields has done and he hasn't been able to put it together in his first 5 years of his career. And Rodgers, I know he was not what you expected last year, but it was still one of the best seasons in Jets quarterback history. It's going to be tough for them to get that level of play. It's unpredictable. If they can figure out how to mesh, the legs with his arm, I think they'll be okay, but that's a big question mark.
We'll get into it much more with Andy Vasquez, NJ Advanced Media, when we return here in-game live game day on SportsGrid. We are previewing the New York Jets 2025 season here with Andy Vasquez of NJ Advanced Media. Again, get him on Twitter at Andy_Vasquez. Andy, let's bring it back to the quarterback somewhat here. Justin Fields, where, we don't know. Again, you talked about it. He performed very well before his benching in Pittsburgh because ultimately Mike Tomlin wanted to go with Russell Wilson. I didn't like it. I spoke out against it at the time for, all that my opinion matters. But I guess to Wilson's credit, the team did win some games after. Fields, I thought, played well. And I think it's interesting to see him, out of the gate, get another starting opportunity. He doesn't have a guy breathing down his neck. He knows the job is his, unlike last year. So there's a mental relief there. But for some of the guys around him and stylistically and what this offense looks like Garrett Wilson is coming off of 3 straight 1,000+ yard receiving seasons. Fields is not exactly known for his arm. He's known for his mobility. So just, again, strategically, How does this team play, do you think?
It's been interesting to watch because Fields has this arm that is incredible. I mean, this guy can make every throw, and sometimes he does, but also he misses a lot of easy throws, and he struggles sometimes uh, with the decision making, like because he knows he can make these throws, but he sometimes he shouldn't try them, and he does, and that's kind of been an issue in camp. There's been a lot of inconsistency. I do think they're in a much better spot with Tanner Engstrand as the offensive coordinator. You already can tell they're going to be more creative. They have a plan where they're trying to get the ball in guys' hands in places where they're at their best, especially with Breece Hall. Aaron Glenn has talked openly about it. They're going to line him up out wide at wide receiver. He might be their second best receiver. And, 2 years ago, Nathaniel Hackett was like at week 10, he's like, I didn't realize Breece Hall was such a good receiver. So, I mean, you're going to be light years ahead of where they were in that regard. And I think that is going to make a difference. But I do think it's a tough fit because he's not a pure passer. He's going to struggle with some of this stuff. He's been slow to kind of get rid of the ball. And it was more than like from watching him in games of what I thought. And maybe that's just like part of the training camp and what they're asking him to do and his process. And it'll look different on game day when he has that option to bolt out of there with his feet. And I think that's going to be the key is like, when does he use that? Because he's the best, one of the best in history at escaping the pocket, using his feet and making huge plays. And he did it in the scrimmage on Saturday, a 25-yard touchdown where he was so alone by the time he got to the end zone. Like, you were like, did he go out of bounds or did he score? Like, no, he scored that easily. I mean, the guy is ridiculous. So it's going to be how they use that balance. I think like they want him to be more of a run threat than he was last year in Pittsburgh. But I think they also want him to kind of throw the ball down the field because I think they had a really tight leash on how he was operating in that offense last year in Pittsburgh. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can walk that tightrope and have a functional offense. I think the key though is that they are going to run the ball a lot with Breece Hall, with Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, who has looked really good in camp. Another second-year pro. Him and Davis and Allen have looked really good, and I think they're going to carry the ball a lot, and Breece is going to be more of a passing weapon than you might expect.
Andy, if you look at a few of these players on this team, you have some extreme talent. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner. But, if we're going to play devil's advocate a little bit here, we're talking about, gosh, they ought to win more than 5.5 games. The over looks like a good bet. What if we go the other way? They have lost a lot of players. You talked about Mosley retiring. The offensive line is totally new, basically. I want to say they lost 3 players, off of the offensive line. Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers. They still have some talent, yes, but, you said it right from the get-go. I don't know if they have as much talent as they've had the last couple of years. So are they really, is there a good chance that they could lose or win less than 5.5 games?
I mean, we're talking about the Jets. So yes, there's always a chance. And like, you don't know what weird thing could happen. And like, you can't rule that out. I mean, I think they do have more stability on the offensive line than in years past. It feels like every year they're losing 3 players, but this year I think it was only 1 starter, and there's some shuffling, but their offensive line is actually in a good place for the first time. Wide receiver number 2 is an issue, and it's been disappointing in camp because nobody stood out. It's really Garrett Wilson had more catches and yards last year than everybody else combined on the roster, and it's Josh Reynolds is the number 2 receiver, and it's because none of the younger guys on the roster, like Malachi Corley, who was the number 1 pick of the 3rd round last year. I mean, he might not make the team. Alan Lazard is Alan Lazard. You're going to get what you're going to get at this point if Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback. I mean, I think there is a chance that they can be made very one-dimensional on offense, and it's a problem for them. I think there's a chance that, they have some new guys in the secondary, Andre Sisco, Brandon Stevens, that can get exploited. And if they can't get pressure on the quarterback when they're blitzing, because Quinnen Williams at defensive tackle, they lost a lot of depth, and its defenses are going to single out Quinnen Williams. And you got Jermaine Johnson coming back from a torn Achilles. They're probably going to be on a pitch count for the first month or 2 of the season. Like, if they're not putting pressure on the quarterback because they're blocking Will McDonald and Quinnen, and quarterbacks can pick them apart, and teams shut down Garrett, it could get ugly, and you don't know how a first-year coach is going to react to that. I think that they do have enough talent to figure it out. I think they'll get over that number. But yeah, there is definitely a blueprint there for it getting ugly, and it could happen on both sides of the ball where there's big question marks.
Last one for you, Andy. Breece Hall, elite talent. Obviously, I'm a fan. Love watching him. There's no question, though, he did take a step backward last year. The total yards, rushing, receiving, receptions, touchdowns, it all took a step backward from the previous season. How much of that was maybe a sign of things to come versus just the presence of Braylon Allen and the team using both guys?
I think we're underestimating how bad that coaching situation was, especially after Saleh got fired and what was going on. The change in play caller. I don't think they had a lot of direction. At one point last year, Breece was like, "I'm antsy because I'm worried about my blitz pickups." He admitted that after a game and admitted to losing his confidence. I think it wasn't a physical thing. I think it was a mental thing. And if you look at how he did running through first contact, that's all mental, and he was awful at it last year, and he was much better at the first 2 years. He's primed for this is a contract year. He's primed for a big year. I think he's going to bounce back in a huge way.
Andy Vasquez, NJ, Advanced Media. Get him on Twitter, Andy_Vasquez. Great breakdown of the Jets. Andy, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.